You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
You're tuned in to In My Humble Opinion, Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Razor's with us, and Nathaniel Starr is also joining us for this conversation. So, amid the controversy here in Charlottesville, the fight to remove the Confederate monuments, namely the Robert E. Lee statue that sits high in Lee Park and the Stonewall Jackson monument that's also on the agenda, we at IMHO felt compelled to join the conversation, okay? And you know how we do. We provide the information, have a comprehensive dialogue about it, and then leave it to you to draw your own conclusion. So about a week ago, white nationalist, UVA graduate, the man responsible for coining the term alt-right, and who many are calling the face of white supremacy, Richard Spencer and followers protested at the site of the Lee statue, and at some point lit torches, which were strikingly similar to that of a KKK rally. Many in the city of Charlottesville are in an uproar about his presence here, so I contacted him. And wanted to talk to him about why he feels the statue should remain, and to give our thoughts, of course, from the other side of history. Okay, so Mr. Spencer, thank you again for granting us this interview.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. So, Richard, you were here about a week ago, and I guess the first question for you, I'd like to know whether or not you were invited. Did someone request your presence here in Charlottesville?
Yes, I was invited to a degree, but I also took a part in organizing the rally. There were actually some other people who really took the lead in organizing it. But yes, we were outsiders coming into Charlottesville, although I, of course, have deep connections to Charlottesville. I attended UVA, and I lived in Charlottesville a little bit after that as well.
Okay.
But we saw this as a great place to do this rally. It's a beautiful place that I wanted to return to. And also it's just deeply symbolic in the sense of this movement that's happening around the country right now. And that is the taking down of these monuments.
Okay, so let me ask you a question quickly. Many are calling that rally that you held here in Charlottesville nothing less of a Klan meeting. I'm sure you've heard that. So
nothing less?
That's right. And I'm confident that if it were, you'd say so. So can you explain to us why you felt your presence was necessary, here in Charlottesville in support of the statue?
Sure. Well, of course, it was not a Klan meeting. I've never met any person who's a member of that organization, nor am I a member of that organization.
Okay.
So no, it was not that at all. The other thing is that the Ku Klux Klan does not have a monopoly on torches. Fire at night is a beautiful spectacle, and you can find examples of all sorts of political movements and non-political movements and religious movements and whatever using that, that beautiful effect of fire at night. So I would love to do it again. So no, that's not what we were trying to evoke. But we were trying to evoke something mystical and magical. That is definitely for sure.
Mystical and magical. Okay.
Now, Richard, let me ask though. Just being a little sympathetic about it. Can you see the other point of view of how that does bring to recollection those types of images from decades past? I mean, can you sympathize with that point of view, or do you think it's off base?
No, I can see how someone could think that. I mean, at the same time, we can't be trapped in the past, in the sense that, anything I do might possibly have been done by Hitler or something, and therefore we can't do it. I mean, that you can't live like that. We have to live in the now. We have to wake up every morning with the sun and do something new and fresh. So the fact is, the torches, what we were trying to evoke, we achieved, and that is a mystical and magical presence. I would encourage, if you're involved in a political movement that I might support it or I might not, I would encourage you. I would support your right to do a torchlight parade. It's a beautiful thing. But that's what we're going after.
You have to understand that mystical and magical presence all depends on who you're speaking to.
Of course. But that, you could say that about everything.
Right. So I guess my next question is, you said that your effort or your mission here is to maybe to stop the taking down of Confederate monuments. Can you elaborate on that a bit more, what it means to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I did. I grew up in Texas, and I've obviously lived in the South as well. I lived in Charlottesville, Virginia for a time. And I absolutely admire the heroism, and also the gentlemanly manner of heroes like Robert E. Lee and so on, and also the kind of tragic nature of someone like Robert E. Lee, someone who actually viewed the Civil War as a tragedy, who viewed slavery as a tragedy for all involved. And I deeply admire those people. They are men of my race. They are not just Americans. They're Europeans, and in the sense of Europeans writ large. They are gods for us. They express a certain ideal, a kind of legend of who we can be.
Right.
And tearing them down is tearing down a symbol of who we are. And it is very similar to major political transitions, where the old political authorities are brought to the ground and the new ones are propped up. You could even compare it, although this is a bit salacious, you could compare it to some of the Taliban destroying Buddhist monuments or something, although it's not quite that bad. But it is very similar to changes in regime, when statues of the former authorities are brought to the ground.
Now, you have to understand, when someone like that represents gods to you, what it may represent to someone, as I mentioned earlier, on the other side of history. Because for people like myself and the others that you're talking to right now, those symbols represent my ancestors being bound, sold as property, murdered, beaten, maimed. You have to understand that.
I do
as a human being.
I get it. You're not talking to someone who's going to, some stupid conservative who's going to be like, oh, well, they fought for freedom, or they fought for states' rights, or some of that nonsense. I totally understand. If I were African American, I would be deeply alienated from those statues.
So if you understand it, why would you want to keep that imagery in the forefront of America?
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
If you understand it, if you sympathize with it, and I don't want to project onto you, but if you sympathize with it, then why would you want to keep that imagery in the forefront of America? Why would you and followers like you?
Because it's about me. I mean, it's about my people. I mean, if I lived in Africa, I'm sure I would be alienated from a great many public monuments. They wouldn't speak to me, or it might rub me the wrong way. But these statues are statues of my people, so that's why I want them.
Yeah, and I mean, I can speak on someone who's spent time in Africa. I mean, there's a multitude of African countries who are very inclusive, but I know that's besides the point. But as far as these monuments and these statues, I heard you mention wanting to be in the now and not staying in the past. So in regards to that, if our history tells us that we are the United States of America at this point, so that would mean that that we went through a season to where values of the Union that created the United States, they won out. So what is the romanticizing of the Confederacy that is so important?
I think that it is important to romanticize the Confederacy to a degree. I think it's important to look back at the Civil War as a terrible tragedy, and I think it's important to honor the dead. Not all heroes win. Some heroes lose. And I think everyone, even if you totally disagree with the Confederate side, a serious person, or at the very least a serious white man, but I would say really any serious person, would want to honor General Lee and at least understand him, appreciate him. And so that's what we were doing. Believe me, the last thing I want to do is refight the Civil War. I want to unify with other white people around the country and really around the world. So I'm not a secessionist. I don't believe in states' rights or anything like that. I'm not a libertarian. I'm not any of these things. But the fact is, people like Stonewall and Lee are, avatars of something great about the white race, and that's why I love them.
Okay.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
And welcome back to In My Humble Opinion. Charles Lewis and Maxilia Robinson.
Yes.
Special guest with us today, Nathaniel Starr. And of course, on the boards as always, Rosa. And so at this moment right now, we have our special guest, no stranger to the In My Humble Opinion airwaves, Mayor Mike Signer. How are you, sir?
I'm well. How are you?
Doing well.
Doing good. Thank you.
Absolutely. I always appreciate you taking the time out to speak to the community, and I know they appreciate it as well.
Thank you.
And so, Mayor Signer, we already know the elephant in the room, so we're not going to delay anymore. Go ahead and give us the current status right now of the city council and the stance that is taking regarding Lee Park.
Yeah, well, so there's been a lot that happened recently. We had two separate important votes for this regarding that park over the last couple months. The first one was a unanimous vote, 5-0, to add new memorials to both Lee Park and Jackson Park that will reflect our current values and also tell a much fuller story of race in Charlottesville, including addressing slavery, and that would specifically be at Jackson Park. So the Freedmen's Bureau was close over there as a slave auction block, so we really wanted to tell the full story there, and that is expensive and complicated to put in new monuments, so we allocated $1 million to do adding more history to those parks, and then have something in Lee Park that would really, I hope, to basically tell the story of current diversity and pluralism in the city and provide a rebuttal to that. And then we were going to rename the parks. So that's going to happen in the next city council meeting. We're moving full steam ahead with renaming them. Now, and then that was unanimous. There was a second vote, which was 3-2, to move the statue of Robert E. Lee out of the city. That was a very divided vote, a very divided issue in the community, as I've heard it, both black and white, left and right. That question has, I've heard thousands of opinions at this point. I voted against that. I was in the minority there, and I can explain a lot more about why I made that decision. It was in part because I just the opinion that I heard from within the black community, within the white community. I've heard hundreds, probably thousands of opinions at this point, but the Blue Ribbon Commission on Race Memorials and Public Spaces that we set up, they recommended that we keep the statues inside the city of Charlottesville, that we don't try and move them. And in part, when they cited that, there was a paragraph where they said numerous African Americans who came and spoke to the commission. They held 17 public hearings, spoke in favor of keeping the statues here, so that if we erase the past, then we're condemned to repeat it. That was basically the argument that they were making. Now, it's very hard to lump everybody together into one voice. It's almost impossible on this issue. It's deeply divided, many people, and I've just been grappling and struggling as best as I can, and I'm still listening. But anyway, so what happened was we made that decision. That's a decision of council. That is according to our rules. We had a majority decision, so I support us moving ahead. And what happened was pretty soon after there was a lawsuit to stop that removal, because there's a statute in Virginia that prevents the removal of war memorials, and the judge said that he thought that it was a credible enough argument that statute would prevent this removal. That statute's been there for, I think, 30 years. And then the judge responded by doing what's called a preliminary, it was an injunction to prevent us from moving or selling the statute while he makes the decision. So that right now we're kind of in a holding pattern on that issue, but we're moving full steam ahead on renaming the parks and putting in these new memorials, and also putting in new narrative that will tell the full story of race here. And that's where it is right now. In the meanwhile, this horrific thing happened last Saturday, which ripped me apart. Really, and I'm white. I mean, it was just a horrible experience watching these white nationalists come here and make a national spectacle of our little city with these torches at night. And there was this Richard Spencer and this movement who kind of invented the term alt-right, and it was You know, and I've spent the week fighting with them and getting in all kinds of Twitter battles and trying to call them out, do the best I can to speak to our values. So it it's been a very, very volatile week.
Yeah. Now Richard Spencer is actually a guest on our show today. So we had the privilege to be able to.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So we have the privilege to actually pick his brain a little bit and have a respectful.
No kidding.
Have a respectful conversation.
Wow. So I'm sorry. I've been dealing with my kids and my family all day, but I will listen to that when I can. I'd be very curious about. It's very open-minded of you. Yeah,
yes, absolutely. I think the community deserves that. They deserve to hear all sides and needs the discussion. So, but in that vein, do you feel that the by erecting other statues or other sides of history is going to sort of squelch the tempers of the alt-right versus just taking it down and trying to get rid of it?
I don't know what will squelch their tempers. I will tell you that I'm not in the habit of having my decisions or thinking shaped by extremists in any vein. So I just try to come to what the right decision is, especially on really difficult issues. This is a group that is so out of whack. I think that we can't respond to them. We just have to make our own decisions. So, for instance, I'm Jewish, and I've had hundreds of just grotesque anti-Semitic messages directed my way, including cartoons of me and just stuff that you couldn't possibly reason with. I mean, so I don't think anything that we do is gonna. If I can't even guess what will change their minds. This group. I mean, I think a lot of it is just very unhinged. And so I think we just have to do what we think is the best thing for the city. And as I said, I've come to the opinion that adding more history and creating a dynamic where we allow to be displayed, but rebut and repudiate this Jim Crow past is a good path for the city. But I'm taking it all in. Even this last week.
So I'll ask you, because Richard has had some not so nice things to say about you, and about anyone for that matter who doesn't support leaving the Confederate statues where they are. What is your message? I've read comments, but what is your direct message to people that are in support of leaving the Confederate statue where it is, and in support of this white supremacy thing that they're bringing to the city of Charlottesville?
Well, I support leaving the statue where it is.
Okay.
So, but I don't. That's my position. I support leaving the statue where it is and putting in new memorials around it that rebut it and that create a totally new context and that radically transform the way we deal with race in public spaces in Charlottesville. That's been my position since the beginning.
So do we put up something like a Nat Turner statue?
What's that?
I said, so do we put up something like a Nat Turner statue?
It could be a lot of things. I mean, the Blue Ribbon Commission, they recommended avoiding doing specific people. So they did 17 public hearings and had a ton of, it was very profound what they did, and they put together this multi-100-page report. So I've tried to hew pretty close to what they recommended because they did so much work on it. There's so much to celebrate in terms of what, it's interesting. I just ran into a friend this week who's a guy, African-American businessman in the city, and he was thinking we should put a memorial up to Thurgood Marshall, who actually had a connection to Charlottesville because he litigated the case for Gregory Swanson, who desegregated UVA law. I mean, there's a million wonderful ideas out there. Some of them would be specific to a person. Some of them would be about an idea. Could be about, like that statue in Wall Street of the woman, the young girl who's holding her hands up against the Wall Street Bull. Like, how cool is that? And that just shows it doesn't have to even be the same size to even exceed in power, visual, emotional power. I mean, it's just like it just like transforms Wall Street.
Right, and I know people in the community who have some very strong, ideas and opinions on how that could be refaced. Is that going to be something that's going to be open for another Blue Ribbon Committee, or is that going to be decided by the council? And will that?
Well, so that's starting now. What we're going to do is do what's an RFP, or request for proposals that'll go up. So we've instructed that the artists, the sculptors, or the designers who would be artists, that there would be, Wes Bellamy was arguing that there should be a design competition for the artistic installations that would come in there, and I think that's a pretty good idea. So there'd be some public engagement that would happen through the process of like what kind of sculpture goes in there, how brilliant is it, how evocative, how radical, how what themes does it touch on. I mean, I'll just tell you, like, my idea, I'm just one member of council, is in the Jackson Park, I think it would be really cool if that could tell a story of slavery in Charlottesville, both the dark parts, and then it could go into the Freedmen's Bureau, but the slave auction block is over there. We want to memorialize that, and so it would touch on some aspects of slavery. You can't do everything, of course, but it would, and then that would be kind of a more, there would be a part of that would obviously be a lamentation. I mean, that would not be, probably wouldn't be as much a celebration as a lamentation, but then in the Lee Park, where so much controversy, that could be a celebration. That could be a celebration of diversity and civil rights, where Charlottesville got to over the last centuries, the ideals and the heroes we have, and that's just me. I think that would be pretty cool.
Let the people know who may want to chime in or get involved of the next council meeting, or any sign up for the renaming, or ideas in regards to the changes at the park. Just kind of give the public the info that they need to contact you all.
Well, we are moving ahead on this plan to rename those parks in the next city council meeting, which is in 2.5 weeks. There's a meeting of the Historic Resources Commission next Wednesday, and I would encourage that is meant to be a big open meeting with people really giving them their feedback. So the information on where that meeting is will be on the city of Charlottesville's website, and you can call the clerk, which is 434-970-3113. I encourage everybody to call me and to email me and the other members of council and be direct with us. Let us know. Let me know what you think. If you think I'm, screwing up or should have a new idea, I appreciate hearing from people always. So my email is msigner, it's SIGNER @charlottesville.org, and you can get in touch with all of council at council@charlottesville.org. And if you give Paige Rice is our clerk, if you give her a call, if you just want to use the phone, she's at 434-970-3113 again, and that message will get to me if you just want to leave a voicemail. And if you want me to call you back, so just it matters a great deal hearing from people what they specifically think here. And again, this is one of those issues I've been trying my hardest to get it as right as best as I can, and I've known all the way through that almost no matter what I do, I'll have a whole lot of very diverse people be mad at me. So I just am praying, and I'm trying to get it right, but I'm always listening.
Absolutely. Well, Mayor Signer, thank you as always. Thanks for all that you do, and always keeping your lines open to speak through the community here at WVAI.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate what you guys do.
All right, please enjoy your weekend.
I will.
All right, take care.
Thank you.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
I want to hear your response to this. I've heard conversation where people would call acts like last weekend cowardly acts, and they would in fact call you afraid of diversity, of the black man, so to speak, or a minority. I don't know if taking over is the right word, but becoming your equal, I should say. Becoming your equal. Do you have that fear? Is that why you
believe in equality? I mean, I think no one's equal in the sense of we all come from very different perspectives and we have different identities.
But we're created equal. Would you agree?
We're what?
Created equal?
No, I think that's absolutely absurd. I think you have to believe. I mean, if you believe in God and He created us all equal, you would have to believe something like that. To believe something as stupid as human beings were created equal.
Do you believe in God?
We were created unequal. Clearly.
Do you believe in God?
No.
Okay. So let me ask you. All right, is this something more along the lines of say like the train of thought of Thomas Jefferson? Because I know you are a UVA alum of like to where he would justify not technically being a racist and would say, I'm not necessarily for slavery, but I believe that white people are superior, so there needs to be sort of a hierarchy. So a lot of people see white nationalists and things like that as the new white supremacy, or the alt-right as the new white supremacy, the new KKK, some would say. So straight out, do you consider yourself a racist in any form, or do you feel like that white people deserve superiority? Is that why you think we're not equal or created equal?
No, I think we're different. Okay. When you ask like superior, that you're asking a bigger question, and that is in what? I mean, I think that you might not use these words, but I bet you think that your people are superior in a way. Everyone believes that they're chosen, and everyone believes that they're special, and they're right to a degree, from a certain perspective. Mm-hmm. And so, no, I just believe in difference, and I believe that difference is good, and that we actually don't want to be the same. I think all this. People say things like equality is a good thing. Equality. That means everyone's the same. Everyone's the same level down, boring, individual. We can all become Americans and, consume at the same shopping mall and work in the same factory. That sounds awful. I appreciate the fact that you are different than I am. And I want you to be different than I am. And so that's what I'm about. Mm-hmm. But in terms of, superiority or white supremacists, I mean, like, to a degree, sure. I mean, in the sense of, do I feel like my people are special? I value them more? Yeah. But in the sense of, are we, in every measure, are we superior to everyone else? No, we obviously aren't.
Okay. Now, but to directly answer the question, though, by the definition of racist, do you consider yourself in any way a white supremacist or racist by definition?
Well, I mean, I think race is important. Race is real. And I think race is a foundational component of identity. So in that sense, race is important. I think the word racist, I don't think I would ever identify with that word just because it's basically a slur word. It seems to be just purely negative when you call someone a racist. So I don't think I would really identify with anything that is always negative. But do I think race is important? Of course I do.
Okay. I think what I hear you saying in all of that is a man who genuinely loves his people, right? Mm-hmm. So then, can you understand me when I say I genuinely love my people? And
yes.
Okay. So if you understand that I can love my people just as much, and I can stand for mine just as much, you can't then understand my perspective when I say that this symbol represents an era of hatred in my history that shouldn't be in my face anymore.
I understand why you don't like the statues. I really do get it. And I don't actually expect you to like them. But you also need to understand that people like me will fight for them. And people like me know what's really going on when they're taken down.
And what is really going on?
Demanding. I'm not demanding that you like these things. Again, if I were African American and I walked by a General Lee statue, sure, I would wince a little bit. I mean, I would probably, not every time, I would probably come to a certain understanding about it. It is history, it's in the past. And I could even admire him to a certain extent. But yes, I would be alienated from it. I get it.
Okay,
but
now
you need to get me in the sense of this is why I like him.
Okay. I just heard you say you understand what's really going on to remove the statue. What is really going on?
What's really going on is that these statues being torn down are symbols of the massive demographic change. It is the end of white America. It is the end of, to a degree, it's the end of whites having power, cultural, social, political power. We're certainly not there yet, but that is where the arrow of history seems to be pointing. And this is a preparation for it. That's what this is really about. It's ultimately not about fairness. And it's ultimately not really, the new world where we're headed is probably not going to be that great for African Americans who are here. We're not headed in a world in which you're going to be empowered. Arguably, you're going to have less power.
Mr. Spencer.
Yes.
How you doing? This is Rosa, part of the show. Hi. I have a question for you. Just to be direct, in the party that you feel that you're a part of, what place do African Americans and other races have in the hierarchy when it comes to white people or Caucasian Americans?
Well, you have no place there. I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, in terms of, the white people, you're not part of it. I mean, what place do I have amongst African Americans?
Yeah. So my question being is, like, when it comes to the workforce, and I'm sure you eat out at restaurants and everything, would you prefer that other races even work there, or they don't even have a place there?
No, you're mixing up things. I mean,
explain for me, please.
Look, well, I mean, do I treat everyone that I meet with respect? Absolutely, yes. I've never been accused of mistreating someone because of their race, and I would never do that. Sure, I'll go to a restaurant and I'll be served by a black person or an Indian person. I'll do a favor for a Asian person or a black person. Sure, of course, I treat everyone with respect as human beings, but that is daily life. That's economics. That's pedestrian matters. What I'm talking about is identity and culture, and those are just fundamentally different. Those are about who we are as an extended family, who we are as a people.
Mm-hmm. Now, so something that you said just a minute ago I wanted to touch on, because I believe Max asked you a little earlier about, is it about a fear of diversity and things like that? If I'm not mistaken, you kind of negated to answer the question, but then I just heard you say that it is about white people losing their stronghold on society and on government and whatnot. So what are you? So then. You may have to give us your definition of white nationalism, or what you see America to be then. So, what's your solution? Like, do you think that there should be two Americas? You think that people of African descent shouldn't be here? Because if we're going to live together in this country, then we're going to share resources. We're going to share power, things of that sort. So what is your end goal?
Right. I think that the United States of America was a white country. And it was
before the Native Americans, or when?
Yeah, because I'm defining the United States. Yeah.
Okay.
There's a North American landmass. There are definitely other races there. We took it violently from Native Americans, American Indians, and I'm not going to butter that up or pretend that didn't happen as well. Mm-hmm. We conquered it, and. Mm-hmm. And yes, we did not enslave Africans, but we certainly bought and sold African slaves, and we maintained an institution of slavery that was profoundly tragic. We did all this, but we defined the culture, we defined the country, we defined it politically and socially. So it is ours in that sense. It was not a country for everyone. It was a country for us. And that is obviously changing. And because something was something doesn't mean it will always be that. And I don't know what the future of the United States is going to be. I don't think it's going to be two Americas. I think there's a good chance that we might fragment into 100 Americas or more. But in terms terms of what I would ultimately like to see, what is my ultimate end goal, and something that I do think will happen, that I will see. If I don't see it, I think my grandchildren will see it. And that is an ethno-state. That is a racially defined political order.
Mr. Spencer, last question. Let me give you a scenario.
Okay.
Let's say, for instance, you were in a horrific car accident and the blood that you were going to receive was coming from somebody of African American descent. Would you take it for self-preservation?
Yes.
Yes.
Of course. Yes, if it's the right blood type, sure.
Okay. Let me
And
ask you.
I'm also, you guys think I'm kind of a monster. I've donated blood many times. Countless African Americans might be alive today through my generosity.
Right, but what about receiving?
I just said yes.
Oh, okay.
So I'm interested, and hopefully you're inclined to answer this question, how you came into this mindset. Was it something that you were taught as a youth? Was it a bad experience with a black person or minority? How did this ideology of yours come to be?
No, this is not something that I was taught as a youth. In a way, I reacted against my parents, who were fairly standard Republicans. They certainly were not. They were not identitarians or anything like I am. So no, I was not. This was not ingrained in me by any stretch. Although I certainly did grow up in a basically all-white environment. That is definitely true. But in terms of ideology, no. Something like the opposite is closer to the truth. So yeah, I've come to this through a search, in a way, kind of search for my identity. I think, at some level, one of the motivations for me is that I felt, I think like so many people, certainly not just white people, I felt a little bit at sea in the modern world. I felt lost. I felt like, who am I? What am I a part of? What is my community? And I think many of us are asking these questions. And that's actually how I reached my ideology, more than having it, ingrained in me when I was a child or something like that. Again, it's kind of the opposite of that.